This exciting topic.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, colleagues. Indeed, this is the official beginning of this webinar, this side event organized within the International Migration Forum Review happening right now in New York. And some of the lucky panelists and colleagues joining today this side event are there, witnessing this historic event, joining after 4 years of adoption of the Compact. And I'm particularly happy today to introduce this side event with an excellent lineup of speakers and panelists whom we brought to discuss the topic of skills in the context of migration governance. This is a very exciting topic and area, and we are so happy that a number of colleagues and participants are joining us today for just spending this 1 hour with us. As we move forward, just a few household rules, as always, for all the webinars and virtual events. So we have started the recording. I hope that you do not mind doing that. This recording might be made available, probably will be made available for further sharing with those who could not join us. And of course, as always, those who are joining us as participants, as attendees, you have, of course, at any time of our webinar today, a possibility to use the chat. Please introduce yourself. We will be encouraging you engaging interactively with our speakers. We prepared, as I mentioned already, very exciting panel. And very briefly about the panel and the agenda of that 1 hour. So we'll start with the introduction, opening of our Deputy Director General, Ogochi Daniels, who is the DDG for operations within the International Organization for Migration. Thank you for joining this very interesting side event. Afterwards, we will go with the setting the scene with our partner, Helen Dempster, the Policy Fellow and Assistant Director of the Center for Global Development. And I'm so happy to also have the head of this thematic area within the center, Michael Clemens, with us, who will also, of course, listen in and then conclude today's discussion at the end of it. But in between, what we have prepared, also an exciting list of panelists who will be sharing their experiences according to the topic of the discussion, which is about skills, about design of immigration systems which are reflective of labor market dynamics. It's about looking from the perspective of the country of destination labor shortages, zooming into specific sectors, but of course also never forgetting about the country of origin impact of as we discuss labor mobility facilitation. So without further stealing the time from our distinguished panelists, I would like now to offer the floor to you, dear DDG, for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Marina, and good afternoon to all of you who are joining today for this side event on skills for mutual benefit, strengthening the immigration systems for the future of work and the labor market needs of tomorrow. I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of the Center for Global Development and IOM to this virtual event held against the backdrop of the first ever International Migration Review Forum taking place in New York. So in today's webinar, we're going to touch upon different GCM objectives, but mostly on objective 1, to collect and utilize accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policies. Objective 5, enhance availability and flexibility of pathways for regular migration. And Objective 18, invest in skills development and facilitate mutual recognition of skills, qualifications, and competencies. And we'll also discuss how to prepare immigration systems for the future of work and changing skills requirements. Migrants are actively contributing to sustainable development, which requires leveraging the power of migration. There can be no sustainable development without migration and no progress towards the SDGs without including migrants. So while labor markets as societies have undergone profound transformations in the past decade, These changes are often not reflected in current labor immigration policies. And the pandemic, as we all know too well, has further impacted the world of work, imposing remote and virtual work modalities, which have had and will have an impact on skills requirements. Many labor immigration systems are not set up to accommodate this changing world of work, leaving the potential of migration and migrant workers largely untapped. According to OECD, over 1 billion jobs are liable to radically transform in the next decade owing to technology. Another McKinsey scenario estimates that 100 million workers will need to switch occupation by 2030. Moreover, the numbers of the World Economic Forum speak of half of all employees worldwide will need to reskill by 2025. More effort should be placed to create a solid evidence base for informed policy and legislation's development, including through conducting labor market assessments to advance Objective 1, to support regular and circular migration pathways as per Objective 5. And in doing so, and in spirit with Objective 13, it is imperative to ensure migrants are part of this transformation by increasing access to digitalization and employment in global supply chains. This includes coordinated action on financial inclusion and empowerment of migrant workers and members of their families, reductions in remittance costs, and enabling migrant access to financial services and capital to promote entrepreneurship and enterprise development. Immigration systems and other support mechanisms should be coherent with broader development and sectoral priorities designed to address specific needs and aspirations of various categories of migrants and broader communities. States must enhance the flexibility and responsiveness of labor migration pathways in line with their economic development priorities and labor market imbalances in both countries of origin and destination. For labor migration to become an effective tool that serves labor markets, employers and migrants will require, 1, immigration systems to stronger consider labor market information and data, including through new, innovative, and alternative sources of data. 2, more coordination and exchange with the private sector to understand the labor market needs of tomorrow in line with the GCM's whole of society approach. And 3, broad stakeholder cooperation to ensure effective policies and that labor immigration is of benefit to countries of origin and destination, and of course to the migrants themselves. So to address these challenges, IOM, together with ILO, UNESCO, the IOE, and the ITU Confederation, has instituted the Global Skills Partnership for Migration, or the GSPM. You know how we love our acronyms. The GSPM is tasked to mobilize resources, pool expertise, and build platforms to help all involved stakeholders develop sustainable mobility schemes, such as skills mobility partnerships. Further, as IOM, we commit to strengthening migrant and diaspora engagement and contributions for development. Building on IOM's institutional strategy on migration and sustainable development, IOM will continue to support governments, cities, civil society, private sector, and other partners to integrate migration into national and subnational development, planning, and programming, and support the leading role that local actors play in providing innovative and agile responses. IOM will also work to strengthen effective connection between implementation of the Global Compact and the achievement of the SDGs, using the SDG indicator framework to guide implementation and review efforts, including to support the incorporation of progress, challenges, and gaps of the in implementation of the Global Compact and voluntary national reviews. In collaboration with a wide range of partners, especially the IFIs and multilateral banks, IOM will lead in acting on the outcomes of the Global Diaspora Summit 2022 to create conditions to mobilize migrant and diaspora capitals, cultural, economic, social, and human, and improve the conditions for economic and financial empowerment and inclusion. So there's a lot to do. And of course, we will do it together. And so we expect this event today will provide a space for government, private sector, and other stakeholders to discuss cooperation on labor market data and information as a basis for more effective and responsive labor migration systems. So to conclude, I want to thank the Center for Global Development, their commitment and support to conduct this important event, as well as distinguished panelists who will be participating today addressing such a relevant matter and who you really joined this event to listen to and not so much to hear from me. So I wish us all a very productive discussion, and I hand back to you, Marina.
Thank you very much, Lizzie, also by linking our work in the context of design of labor mobility schemes and focus on data, also with the work which our organization is doing in the area of broader context of supporting migrants as contributors to development. Indeed, skills mobility is important, but also diaspora engagement is absolutely crucial. And as we conceptualize the situation with different industries, very often it is the diaspora experts who really left the country, but also can help economic development in specific sectors. So they are all interlinked areas of our work. And absolutely, similarly joining your thanks to our partner, the Center for Global Development, with whom we've been already discussing and doing a lot of work already. Michael, your contribution to the Skills Mobility Partnership and the central part there is absolutely crucial because of your work and advocacy, and of course your team. We are all picking up on this notion of skills mobility partnerships right now and really trying to make it something concrete and real. So we hope that we'll continue this collaboration. Today is a presentation of initial collaboration in the context of study and research that we are undertaking right now. So Helen, over to you for presenting our approach and some of the initial observations of the teaser, as you might be referring to. Over, Helen.
No, thank you very much, Marina, and for your kind words about CGD, and hello to everyone joining us today. So as Marina mentioned, my name is Helen Dempster. I am a policy fellow at the Center for Global Development. And among other areas of development, we have a strong focus on looking at the relationship between migration and development and assessing the impact of migration pathways. And today I plan to speak to you on behalf of a project that we are undertaking with the IOM, looking at how immigration systems can be used to meet labor market demand in high income countries. Next slide, please. So as this slide shows, and as you probably already know, headlines in high income countries are full of concern about skill shortages. Many of these shortages are concentrated in roles that would be deemed mid-skilled. So these are things such as construction, engineering, ICT, and healthcare. And other roles are slightly more low-skilled, sectors such as agriculture, horticulture, and aged care nursing. But regardless of the skill level, these shortages are commanding a greater share of policy attention in many countries. So why do these skill shortages exist? Now, there are, of course, many reasons, but I will talk about two today. So firstly, many of these roles are unattractive to local workers. Wages aren't particularly high and working conditions aren't particularly ideal. Yet, it may be hard for employers to improve these without passing costs onto consumers or making businesses unviable. Secondly, many high-income countries have aging populations and an absolute lack of people to do the work. And in many cases, skill shortages are actually occurring at exactly the same time as record levels of high employment. Next slide, please. So how can high-income countries address these skill shortages? So firstly, they can increase wages and working conditions. And I would note that many businesses are already doing this, adding sign-on bonuses, enhancing flexibility of working, providing bonuses and other perks. But as mentioned, some businesses just might not be able to do this. Secondly, they can mobilize the or underemployed. Things like getting more women into the workforce through better childcare policies and supporting those out of work with additional training. This is definitely a good strategy and should be employed by all countries, but may not provide the number or type of workers needed. Thirdly, they can promote automation. Now, some jobs might be very well suited to this, particularly those in agriculture, but others like nursing and may be more difficult. Fourthly, they can explore offshoring and outsourcing. Many companies are already doing this, looking to move their operations to countries with a greater supply of labor. Yet this can undermine investment in high-income countries and may lead to labor exploitation in the countries where these businesses have been offshored or outsourced to. And finally, and this is what I plan to briefly talk to you about today, they can expand skilled immigration. So how are high-income countries actually using immigration systems to meet labor market demand? This is what our new research aims to try and find out. So we're using job vacancy data collected by MC Byrne and Glass Technologies, represented here by one of our panelists, that daily web scrapes approximately 5,000 online platforms, including job boards, government job statistics, company websites, and websites of agencies specialized in recruitment. They then clean the data and categorize job ads by variables such as job titles, geographic location, occupation, industry, required skills, and education levels. Now, this data is incredibly impressive. It covers a wide range of sources and countries and has been used in a range of academic articles to date, but it does have a few limits. So firstly, of course, some job postings are not online and therefore may not be captured by this data. Secondly, it tends to privilege slightly more higher skilled industries such as ICT and underrepresents lower skilled industries like construction and agriculture. And thirdly, there's no information on when the vacancy is filled, so it can be quite difficult to look at vacancy rates over time. That being said, it has definitely been found in many articles to be a good representation of the labor market in the countries where this data is available. The second part of our research is comparing that data to immigration systems, how high-income countries admit immigrants using skill and education classifications. And in doing so, we want to answer a primary question: how well are high-income countries using immigration systems to respond to labor market demand? Next slide, please. So this is just a very quick overview of the countries and sectors we're looking at. You can see that we've tried to cover a broad range of high-income countries across the globe and also a broad range of sectors at different skill levels. Next slide, please. So just before I finish, I wanted to share with you some very top-line findings from our first piece of analysis of the Byrne and Glass data. So this is looking at the UK from 2015 to 2019. Now, I would note that this is very high level and preliminary. There will be a lot more data in our eventual paper, but you can see roughly the types of things that we're able to find out. So you can see that among this time, the sector with the biggest share of job ads is health and social work, around 50%, followed by professional, scientific, and technical activities at 30%. Now, as you can see, agriculture has quite a low share of ads across the data, which, as I previously mentioned, may not be necessarily surprising. So in 2015, some of the top jobs that the UK was looking for include things within ICT, such as developers and business analysts, technical roles such as business development, customer service, obviously nurses and healthcare assistants at all levels. Within agriculture, roles such as gardeners, drivers, and agronomists are needed. And within construction, roles such as plumbers, carpenters, and quantity surveyors are in shortage. Now, over the last few years, which has been particularly interesting for us, there has been an increase in the share of ads that are requiring people with middle and low skilled occupations, and a decrease in the share of ads in the higher skilled categories. Although we can see some interesting shifts in the education levels that are required within these occupations. So we actually do see an increase in demand for degree education levels, regardless of what we might call the education or skill level of the occupation itself. Final slide, please. So just a final note on next steps. So we really hope to finish our analysis over the coming months, and we hope that the discussion today will feed into that final paper. What we do anticipate, though, is that it will show high-income countries aren't doing enough to expand their immigration systems to meet labour market demand. And hopefully it will posit some potential policy recommendations for those countries, things such as broadening shortage occupation lists or creating new immigration pathways, such as the skill mobility partnerships that were just mentioned. But with these policy options, we want to note some broad caveats that need to be applied and won't be a surprise to any of you. So firstly, there are always going to be limits in political and public will to expand immigration. CGD research has actually shown there's quite widespread support for expanding skilled immigration within specific sectors, but it's still going to be hard to sell these policy options to skeptical audiences. Secondly, currently, many high-income countries respond to labour market needs by creating bespoke or bolt-on schemes, such as pilots and seasonal worker programs. We want to discuss the limits of these as a tool and what can be done to scale and mainstream these initiatives. And finally, all of what I've said today has only focused on the needs of countries of destination. We obviously need to prioritize the impact that these schemes have on the migrants themselves and their communities and countries of origin, exploring things such as remittance programs to enhance development impact and diaspora engagement. Adapting immigration systems should be a matter of mutual benefit for countries of origin and countries of destination. And to do this, we need much broader and deeper collaboration between countries and between public and private sectors in these countries so that we can effectively use immigration systems to address labour market demand. So as I mentioned, this is a great time to feed into this paper. I very much hope you have questions and comments for us and our panel, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Marina, back to you.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. So the messages are there, but the way how you're putting them together, and indeed this joint research study is absolutely exciting for us, an opportunity to really bring different bits and pieces together and then bring the intellectual capacity of us, of our two organizations, but of course tap into the partnerships that we have set up, not only with the our colleagues who are joining us today in terms of the panelists, and I'm referring to the MZ Burning Glass, of course, technology, and then Matt will be with us. So we hope that that's a long-standing collaboration, but also, of course, on the panel, we also have Stefan Heuke today from the Public Federal Employment Agency in Germany. We are collaborating on various aspects of labor migration. Ethical recruitment is something which we are really working together on, but really the topic of skills and the design of labor migration systems, various policy instruments which are used, is something which we really would like to continue discussing. And indeed, Germany is a focus country among 7 of our study, but also today we also invited a representative of the Ministry of Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs. So unfortunately, Ambassador Mohammed Khairat, Assistant Minister, had a last-minute arrangement, but we do have his colleague, Salma Sakra, with us as well, who will also share the vision or some experience from the perspective of a country which has been doing a lot, actually, work to ensure that their migrant workers are going along the migration channels prepared, that there is support, and also focusing on the training, but also labor market analysis. So let us just dive into the discussion of among our panelists. As you said, Helen, we would love to use each single minute of being together to tap into your brains, ideas. I saw already some nodding or actually raising the brows during when we were presenting our initial thoughts. So maybe Stefan, let me start with you. So if you don't mind, we all know about the adoption of the Skilled Migration Act was on the minds of everybody, on the sound of everybody. So COVID struck. Of course, that introduced its own dynamic, but maybe very briefly you could update us on the various policy and legal instruments, of course, the Immigration Act, but maybe some other ones which are used by Germany and your agency specifically to really attract foreign workers from abroad at various levels of their skills. maybe you can also share a little bit about your collaboration with private sector, because indeed what we want to do with our study is to ensure that we are reflecting the dynamics of the labor market from the perspective of the real demand and the sectoral approach. And then, of course, the immigration systems are designed. There are some sort of skill elements, but how do we reconcile the skill elements brought into the design of the immigration systems and the actual skills needs of the employers? Anyway, so Stefan, the floor is yours, whatever you prepared and ready to share with us today.
Thank you so much, Marina, and thank you all for having me. I'll start with an introduction statement. There will be a lot of compound nouns in my statement. Germans like compound nouns to make things more complicated than they actually need to be, but I'll try to translate each and every one of them for you, so we, broadly speaking, know what we're talking about. So as in Germany, we tend to be very structured when it comes to put policies into legal instruments. So as a rule, they go hand in hand, but that takes some time. The main instrument for attracting talent and workers from the various skills levels is the Aufenthaltsgesetz, which is the residence law from Germany, and that goes back to 2005. That was quite a reform at that time. It was aimed at streamlining the visa, the residence permit, and the labor market approval process into a one-stop government process. Although at that time, with a still relatively restrictive approach to opening the German labor market for foreign workers, it has represented a sort of opening and process-based approach to facilitate orderly migration for skilled workers. The residence law and the underlying Beschäftigungsverordnung, another compound noun, the occupation regulation in English, were substantially modernized by the mentioned Fachkräfteeinwanderungsgesetz. That is the famous Skilled Immigration Act of 2019 everyone talks about. The main innovations and the main breakthroughs were a couple of specified amendments to the Aufenthaltsgesetz and the Beschäftigungsverordnung. First of all, the mandatory approval process for each individual visa application by a priority check for preferred domestic job seekers was mostly abolished. That was the main obstacle beforehand. At the same time, the threshold for a generalized approval was, for the first time in German history, generally set at the German apprenticeship skill level, hence the name of the Skilled Immigration Act, which also tells you that this was the segment of the workforce this act was actually aiming at. All this went along with further improvements and important improvements regarding the process of visa application, an accelerated visa processing system, and the introduction of BLAs, bilateral recruitment agreements, for fast tracking the professional recognition for skilled workers by German standards, and this on the basis of bilateral agreements standardizing this process for certain countries and for certain professions, and some more details of enhancing and streamlining this process. Perhaps I can elaborate more during the discussion. Another important milestone was the West-Balkan-Regelung, the next compound noun, which we in English would call the Western Balkans Regulation. This regulation enables workers of all descriptions and professions of all skills levels from Western Balkan states like Serbia and Northern Macedonia to enter the German labor market under relaxed conditions, although still with a mandatory priority checks for their respective working contracts. That helped the Western Balkan countries ease the pressure on their domestic labor markets as well. It has helped reducing the inflow of basically economically motivated asylum seekers, and also at the same time filled tens of thousands on vacant jobs on all skills levels in Germany. This has led to excellent economic and social integration results for the migrant workers. One of the ongoing discussions politically is now to turn it into an unlimited instrument, as well as extending this solution to other countries of origin. As to the coordination with the private sector, the Skilled Immigration Act itself was a result of a coordinated, concerted effort by the governing parties and all relevant stakeholders, especially employers' organizations, but also the trade unions and some domestic NGOs as well. This was called by the former government the Nationale Fachkräftestrategie, you see compound nouns below, the National Strategy for Skilled Workers. This form of concerted action is, from my perspective, one of the structural advantages of Germany as a competitor on a global market. Speaking for us, the Federal Employment Agency, the onus on coordination of the actual recruitment effort is mostly on us. So in each step of negotiating the BLAs with target countries of origin, we closely liaise with the political spectrum in Germany as well as with employers' organizations and the trade unions. Due to our own networking with employers through our dedicated employer services and the data gained there, we gain the relevant data and information about the increasing and changing needs of the dynamic labor market as far as our market share is concerned and as far as our market share is representing that. Another aspect is that we have a specialized key account management for big international players and large enterprises in Germany, which enables us to cater for their needs. Now for the limitations, and perhaps we dig into that a bit deeper later on. One of the limitations of our capabilities for coordination is missing data on the dynamically changes of skill requirements and the skill sets for newly developing jobs, because our own domestic occupation and skill taxonomy is just not fit for this task, nor is it fully interoperable to international standards. Another restriction, as I said, is our own market share, which is steadily on the decline, as is the case with public employment services worldwide, and as such detrimental to the validity of our own market data. Having said that, data from the private recruitment segment at the same level of granularity is almost unavailable to us. So I'm very eager to hear more about that later on from Matt. Thank you. Back to you, Marina.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So, and again, having information and really how different stakeholders are engaging. So in addition to the data available, which Matt will speak about, also, of course, as you were talking, I was wondering, there are also private recruitment agencies involved in the facilitation, maybe not necessarily for Germany, but maybe in other countries. And also we are in discussion with some of them in terms of collaborating. We were anticipating participation of a DECO group today, also at this event. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to really find a participant with who they are involved in the IMRF events, but indeed the idea would be how do we bring the various bits and pieces of information and just to understand the holistic situation. Thank you, Stefan, but maybe Ms. Alma Sakr, I could turn over to you right now. So you've heard about our plans to do this study. You've heard about the work and the developments in the country of destination, probably for Egypt, Germany. Maybe you're, of course, supporting mobility of your workers to other countries. So which aspects would you be able to share with us today? Which laws do you have, or which approaches Egypt or also your ministry utilize to support mobility of workers? And then maybe you can say a few words about one joint initiative between us, but also ILO, the TAM program, which we have in Northern Africa, if you have information or believe that is relevant. So the floor to you, please, Ms. Salma Sakr.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everyone. And it's a bit short notice, but I hope that my participation will be valuable. Egypt is a country of 60% of youth, and that's making it more going to being a young country. So having this and at the same time gives pressure on the economic situation, some sort of. So having migration as a coping mechanism is important for having work opportunities for young people. And being working in the Ministry of Migration, we have participated in one of the very successful programs that you have mentioned, TAM program, which is co-founded by European Union and GIZ. And right now it's expanding beyond Germany, and there are new corridors that have been established with the other European countries as well, according to the experience accumulated in the first phase, I mean. So That's an important aspect that we have been working on, and in the last couple of months there have been some calls for actions so that more skilled workers have the opportunity to for regular migration to Germany and to get to know the skills that they need to have or to develop, and at the same time how they are technically assisted and language skills are enhanced. That's a big part of what we have been working in the last couple of months. And we have also the German Egyptian Center, which helps serve the migrants, the returnees, and the skilled workers in the labor market, so that they can have more fit opportunities in the future, either in Egypt or through regular migration channels. And I'd like to shed some light on what you have mentioned regarding the diaspora engagement, because we have been working with the other expatriates, either excel or expert in industry field or in any other fields, and they have been an important share in the economy of Egypt, either through remittances or transfer of knowledge. Right now, Egypt is launching a very exponential development project that's named Decent Life, and through our expatriates in different countries all over the world, we have been able to share both knowledge and participation through mutual projects between the government and those expatriates, either in US or Canada. And at the same time, that's helped young people in the villages that are so far away from the center of the country to be able to have more job opportunities and to have a decent life in general. And I think that's very important when we are talking about the migration development nexus. Another important aspect that we have been working on as a country that's hosting COP27 this year in the engagement of expatriates on how to combat irregular migration as part of President Sisi's recommendation on World Forum 2017, the initiative of life-saving boats. And we have been working on 14 governorates in Egypt in order to alleviate their problems and at the same time help them gain practical expertise and the needed skill set for their life, so that they avoid pursuing irregular migration corridors and channels. That have been helping also on the aspect of climate change impacts, because as a country that depends on agriculture more than industry, we have our lion's share and in this problem if there is a water stress as expected by UN by 2050. And that's a big problem that we are facing right now, and we are working on to coordinate between combating irregular migration and at the same time combating climate change. And just a few days ago, we have launched a mutual project with the Ministry of Higher Education in order to enhance research and development on this thematic areas, either on food security, health security, and at the moment labor market needs as well. A last point to share with you, I think that's very important, in that we are launching in the next couple of days, Egypt Can by Industry sixth edition. And I think that's important because it's not only an opportunity for sharing expertise of the expatriates here in Egypt and seeking mutual cooperation and mutual understanding between the government of Egypt and its expatriates, but at the same time, it brings new avenues for the economy of Egypt in its pursuing national strategy of industry and nationalizing the industrial aspects, because that will help us alleviate any pressure on the Egyptian economy and at the same time combat irregular migration and climate change impacts. So I think when I'm looking at the immigration system, I'm looking at as part of a more expanded system that involves development, migration, and at the same time enhancing people's welfare. I hope that I've covered the potential areas, the potential area that you have been seeking to know about with regard to Egypt's efforts regarding migration system and labor force. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Salma. Of course, we need to remember the context of your work. COP27 this year is really something which is framing the whole discussion within IMRF. Climate change is actually a priority for our organization. And I think if I were to give a motto to this IMRF vis-a-vis the previous discussions, for me, it is the topic of integration, because you cannot speak about one topic separately away from another. And that's the whole objective. And that's the challenge and the beauty of working in the migration area, that all those sectoral elements become very, very important and very relevant. So thank you so much. So let me maybe now, please stay with us, because now we turn maybe to Matt. You've heard that. You've heard the discussions about our research. You've heard about the situation of our colleagues working in the ministries which are designing migration policies or involved in really attraction and regulation of labor mobility. Now, turning to you and your efforts in creating transparency in the labor market, ensuring that we have better knowledge, we have real-time data. So what feedback can you propose to us, to this audience, and maybe some sort of comments from the perspective of helping governments in designing better approaches?
Well, Marina, first of all, thanks so much for the opportunity to join this conversation. It's particularly exciting for me, having spent 20 years building MZ Burning Glass and pioneering some of the use of these data to drive the transparency you just described. I, at the start of this year, stepped out to create a NGO called the Burning Glass Institute, which is fully independent and focused on being able to explore how these data flow into policy, and so to be able to take the kind of research around these data and to be able to understand what kinds of structures make these data most effective. At the start of the, before the start of the call, actually, when we were talking just among the panelists, I said that this is a golden moment, I think, for immigration and migration policy both. And I think that's because of some of the kind of talent shortages that Helen described, and that are being experienced in so many countries around the world right now. I think they give us a chance to reframe the narrative, to reframe the perception of migration and immigration from being from exclusion to inclusion, from being a problem to being solution. But the extent to which immigration and migration can be that solution depends on their alignment with the talent needs that industries in economically advantaged countries rather, are suffering from. And to be able to understand that takes data. And so that's where the creation of an effective labor market observatory can come in being able to leverage real-time data to characterize and to forecast demand. Essentially, the way I would put it is that every country has, every nation has an economic development strategy. It has an economic growth strategy. But how do you translate that economic growth strategy to a talent strategy? How do you understand where the workforce is today, where it's the workforce that the nation will need going forward, and in a very granular level, be able to understand where the gaps are between the two? Because if you can understand those gaps, then you can understand opportunities to address those gaps, whether that be domestically through the education and training system to create a pipeline of talent, or whether it be through immigration and migration to be able to address those talent gaps. Now, there's a couple of key attributes which I would say are going to be critical to being able to develop that data-driven understanding. One is being able to understand the nature of demand at a sub-occupational level. Another is being able to understand the dynamism of the market. A third is being able to identify shortages, so where those gaps are. And then finally, I think it's to create the common language for connecting between where talent is, where talent will be needed. So from a demand perspective, I think a critical aspect here is the ability not only to have a comprehensive view on demand, but the ability to get to sub-occupational detail. What we know about the labor market in quite a number of countries the world around is that demand is or I should say that demand gaps or supply gaps really occur not at broad levels, right? You know, we tend to like to think about, hey, we don't have enough people in technical careers or in STEM careers or the like. But where we really actually see demand landscape, you know, sort of coming into focus is where we can actually understand not just the specific occupations, but the specific skills and the specific credentials that are required. That's especially important, and this gets to the point about dynamism in the economy, that the nature of demand can have subtle differences in it. Those are sectoral differences, those are geographic differences. The skills that are needed for a job for the same job in two different sectors can be different. The skills that are needed for the same job in two different cities can be actually considerably different. And so as we try to understand what is the talent that we need to bring, we need to understand that not only at a national level, but we need to understand it at a much more nuanced level as well. It's possible to have a workforce from a supply perspective domestically and to have demand domestically, which look like they more or less align, but actually have significant points of misalignment. So the ability to get to that granularity around skills, around credentials, around experience levels is key to being able to understand where the pipeline of future talent through the education system can be productive and where actually we need to create a more effective motor and a more timely motor through migration and immigration. Dynamism is an important part of this equation. We'll be releasing a study early next week that we've undertaken together with our colleagues at the Boston Consulting Group, where we found that the average occupation in some developed economies, just over the last 5 years, has seen 37% of its skills replaced. Now, think about that level of dynamism, which is a very different kind of dynamism from the one we tend to think about, which is jobs going away, jobs being born. But instead, this is the same kinds of jobs that we've always had, but now with very different sets of skills. That poses significant potential for mismatch between supply and demand in the domestic economy, because the workers we have, workers who have been in various kinds of jobs for a long period of time, may not have the skills that are required for the future. And so being able to understand how skills are changing, how not only in the introduction of technical skills, but the hybridization of skills from across domains may be creating disjoints in the market. So since I know our time is running short, I'll just very briefly talk about how this also helps us to be able to characterize shortages in a more effective way. Again, I think a lot of the talent shortages that we hear so much about today are really the effects of a demographic drought in a lot of developed nations. But actually what we tend to see as well, and I think this gets less focus, is significant mismatch. This is the fact that we'll often see skills of a role now, which are very different from the skills before. We see that we can have workers in a given field who don't have the sets of experiences that are required. And so the ability to understand specifically what are, not only to have a occupational view of migration and immigration policy, but a skill level view can make for a very effective mechanism in the market. I'll conclude with just this thought, which is really thinking about how we create a common language. So we have right now, a signal processing, as I think engineers problem, as engineers would like to refer to it, in the labor market, which is to say that how employers describe their needs and how workers describe their capabilities are often in very different terms. And likewise, how educators are able to describe their offerings. Now compound that with immigrants and migrants who are coming from a completely different context. And so you can have people who have the right sets of skills, who have the right sets of capabilities, but aren't plugged into a credentialing system, don't have the skill language to be able to signal effectively in ways that line up with employer demand. So a lot of what we need to be able to do is to be able to translate across employers, to be able to understand different employers using the same language or different language rather to describe the same sets of skills. How do we understand that? How do we provide those signals effectively, not only as a policy mechanism to understand where talent is needed, but as a transparency mechanism, just again, to use your term, Marina, around to be able to empower migrants and immigrants to understand where opportunity lies so that they can navigate effectively and so that they can really be able to connect themselves and be an engine, a very positive engine in the economies that they're joining. I know our time is short. I would love to continue on this, but I will turn back to you.
Absolutely, we would love to have more time. I'm right now looking at the clock, indeed, getting a little bit scared that we ran out of time, but that just to demonstrate how important and how complex and how interesting and exciting this topic is. And I think, again, as we said at the very beginning, it's just a teaser of the report, which we are still working on. And this is something where we are inviting everybody to contribute and to stay in touch with us, because indeed we just right now starting to look into data. We are in touch with the governments whose data, whose immigration systems we're going to have a quick overview over, and we hope that we will have a presentation of the report in a few months, as Helen mentioned, and we'll make sure that we have, we see who is attending this event, that the colleagues and partners will also have invitation. So we're extremely excited and absolutely looking forward to some of the observations. What you spoke about, Matt, are absolutely critical. I saw most of our panelists were nodding, and Michael was the one who was with his pen thinking. So Michael, if you don't mind, if I give this pleasure and honor of you to close this event and maybe share a few observations, since we ran out of time. I wanted to give an opportunity for each of the panelists to say a few words, but maybe you would be the one concluding on behalf of all of us. I'm sure we'll be in agreement with your statements.
Thank you so much. It's really my honor. If I had to draw one thread through all of these 6 interventions we heard, it would be innovation. I'm a migration economist. People are always asking me, questions that are some version of, is migration good or bad? Should there be more of it? Should there be less of it? And my answer is yes. It's good and bad, and there should be more of it, and there should be less of it. You're asking the wrong question. The right question is, what are the new institutions and new structures we need to make migration work as well as possible for more people? And you heard many examples of those kind of innovations here. Salma spoke of THAM initiative, Stefan Heuke mentioned, among others, the Western Balkan regulation, which I think is a really fascinating innovation that other countries could learn a lot from. Matt talked about the labor market observatories and how they could be made to serve the 21st century. These are the kinds of things that the Global Compact spoke of. It's rather than the threat to sovereignty that Donald Trump saw it as when he pulled my country out of the process before there was even a text. All it is a list of the ways that we could make migration better by innovating. One of those ways is global skill partnerships, which this website up here is about, gsp.cgdev.org, focusing on one innovation that we have felt that is important, which is skill formation in origin countries to eliminate and even reverse brain drain at the same time as tailoring migrant skills for destination country needs. But so many other innovations that these panelists spoke of. The need for better forecasting of labor market needs, the need for labor market mechanisms to divert out of the asylum system people whose main role will be to strengthen the economy at the destination country and thereby strengthen the asylum system. A constellation of other innovations, and if you want to learn more about these things, follow everyone that you've heard from. Follow Marina Manka's work, Helen Dempster's work, Salma's work, Stefan's work, and Matt's work going forward. This is a grand project, and I really hope that and expect that there will be fruits of all of it at the next IMRF.
Well, I hope they'll be a bit earlier than that. So we give ourselves a few months perspective. Next time IMRF is in 4 years. But absolutely, I think it's absolutely crucial. The motto, again, another one of in addition to integration, I think it's also action orientation, because again, we don't want to go and talk about the same things, and you're absolutely right. We need to come every time and build on all the great ideas and initiatives and demonstrate their value for the situation of concrete migrants and communities. And countries, of course. I mean, there was an exciting 1 hour which we spent together. I apologize to our participants. I saw a lot of those names whom I know, and those who join us today, really the ones who believe in this work. And then there's a lot of it to be done. As we spoke, it's such a complex area, so we need so much more data, more information. So let me use the last seconds of our time together to advertise a few more events which are happening, which are also quite innovative. So tomorrow in the morning, so there will be an in-person event about the Global Diaspora Summit, which actually both Germany and Egypt supported and really participated very actively. And there is a declaration, the Dublin Declaration, which announces and focuses on the contributions of migrants on Objective 19. Another innovative policy area which is emerging is about labor mobility for refugees. This is an event which we're organizing together with Talent Beyond Boundaries on Friday evening. So also a lot of colleagues and partners will be there. And also yet another one, I think it's happening almost in a few hours, is about our event with the Bali process, where we zoom into the role of private sector and the issue of their role, the supply chain transparency, ethical recruitment. But again, the industry representatives, specifically from hospitality industry, will be participating. So all these various workflows, ideas, processes are absolutely exciting. So let's definitely stay in touch. Many, many thanks to all of you on behalf of our co-organizers. I hope CGD colleagues allow me to do that. Our DG Daniels also had to go for a bilateral, but then she sends best regards. She was also thrilled to be with us here today. And good luck to those, and enjoy the IMRF for those who are only virtually monitoring that. Maybe in 4 years we'll be there in person. Let's look what's happening. But otherwise, stay in touch, stay healthy, and all the best to all.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Ciao. Thank you
Bye.
again. Bye, Salma. Bye, Helen. Bye, Matt. Bye, Stefan.